Hello, hello, hello. Hi. Welcome to our very first collaboration between the BCS, British Computer Society, and Digital. Very excited to welcome you all here tonight. Thank you for coming along, whether you're here in person or online. So we have a lovely evening of two speakers tonight. We have Gillian Arnold, who's the new president of the British Computer Society. It's a mouthful. And she's going to be talking to us about her experience of working at board level and also her experience of working with women in tech. We'll then have a short break of around 15 minutes for some food and drink, and then we'll come back and then we'll hand over to Luke Stringer, who's our mobile app tech principal from Digital, and he will be talking to us about his mobile app strategies for 2023. So we will take questions throughout. For people online, if you can use the Q&A function. For people here, if you just want to put your hand up. But ideally, we'll take questions at the end. If we don't get through all of them, we'll capture them and we'll send an email afterwards. So we'll make sure we address all of them. For people here who've not been here before, the toilets are just through there near the kitchen. And if there's a fire alarm, which we're not expecting, please go back down through the stairs into the car park area. I think that's it in terms of housekeeping and instructions. Any questions from anyone before we start? No?
So a quick drift around my career, some stuff about what I've done in Women in Tech, and then some stuff about the BCS. And a really little bit about the BCS and what it kind of generally does, if you remember, but more importantly, what we do at the top of the BCS with regard to governance, because governance sounds like a really boring thing, but actually what it is the next step in your career. And so I'd really like you to think about the next step in your career, because I think it's got more in it than governance says. 1977. Oh, Huddersfield was boring in 1977. And so whilst I might have been listening to a bit of punk and a bit of funk, I was actually dying to get out and had to be in London. And I got myself a job as an operator, working on mainframes all night. Fantastic, loved it. Listening to a lot of punk at the time, and became a shift manager for a bank, working with mainframes and working all night and doing some experimental stuff. That was kind of interesting. Became a data center manager for the experimental data center. And then there was an incident, and it was an incident around the race of one of my team members. And I was really uncomfortable with it. And I didn't know what to do with that. And so I left and I said, right, I'm going to go and be a consultant. I can't work here. The culture's all wrong. And I went out doing change control and information management. And I was a consultant for a little while until I found a job working at IBM. And I went and took the test and they said, you have had the worst test we've ever seen anyone do. However, we think you're very enthusiastic, so we'll give you a try. And I went to be an instructor for IBM customer education, which was amazing. But at the same time, I was so scared. I was so out of my depth because I'm surrounded by white senior men, and they are all Oxbridge educated. And I've had this lot, but I failed my A-levels. I forgot to mention that the reason that actually I left was because I was over here seeing the Sex Pistols instead of studying for my A-levels. So, you know, it was really important to me that I was surrounded by Oxbridge men. And 3 weeks in, I realized that actually I'd got stacks of practical experience, and what they didn't have was practical experience. They had the theory and they could teach assembler and they could do all that, but they couldn't do it. And so then I realized that I did have something, and that, you know, we're all different. And then I headed through the dance era and I went into technical support. So I did 7 years in education, went into technical support, did some marketing, and then they said, actually, we want you to have a new product. It's called Component Broker. when they finally got a decent name for it, it became WebSphere. And so, you know, we were sailing, and I took the European technical team for WebSphere, the first ever. So it's really exciting. And in big companies, you can move around. So IBM was fabulous for that. You know, I could get hauled back to come and sort out the UK technical team, and then hauled back into Europe to do education sales lead, strategic business development, and go off and learn how to sell cloud. Well, there's this thing called cloud. We want you to go and learn how to sell it. This would be about year 2000. So I went and did that for a while. That was really interesting. Still lots of dance music, became a sales manager, finally went back into tech. And then they said, oh, we're going to change the pension plan. And so this big pot that I thought I'd saved up was going to disappear. And I thought, right, time to go, time to leave and set up my own company. But that was 22 years inside of IBM, and doing all these things from System 360, and then around about midway leaving Z Series and moving on to WebSphere, and then grid computing, which was the start of the cloud and the big data lake stuff. And then my last part of IBM was working with architects. So I had a big team of architects. It was very, very, very exciting. I loved the technology. So that's where I've been. And my company, as you can see from the name, started off as technical, and we created software. And then we kind of drifted into diversity, because actually, whilst all of these wonderful things were happening to me, whilst I was out in America, and whilst I was writing books, and whilst I was meeting incredible people, the underlying thing was, you're not good enough, you don't fit here, you're a woman, we don't really have women. And whilst IBM was really trying hard, you still didn't feel like you fit in the 1980s, in the 1990s. And so whilst I was doing all that, I was also going, I want to be part of the women's team. So I became part of women's leadership team, and then set up Women in Blue South Bank, which was a networking group for a couple of thousand women. And then I started to work outside. So Intellect is now Tech UK. So they wanted a chair for their women's group, and I went off and did that. And then I became a non-executive director for an organization that sits up in Bradford called WISE. And so they were the UKRC at the time, and they became WISE a bit later on. And then I chaired BCS as BCS Women. Now, why I'm telling you all of this is, whilst I was inside of IBM doing all this kind of good technical sales, architecture, managerial work, while I was doing all of that, and whilst I felt I didn't fit, I was doing all of this and gaining a whole parallel set of skills. So sure, I could run the European team and I could do that thing, but I didn't know about running a board. I didn't know that I could use my channel skills in managing women in tech or women in STEM. So this is incredibly powerful for your careers in terms of, how do I further develop what I can be? You know, because sometimes you do bounce against a glass ceiling, and it's not because the company is bad or evil or doesn't get women or doesn't get people of color. It's sometimes just because there's a pyramid structure and there's no room to move for the people at the top, and they don't want to go because they're having a wonderful time. So where do you go to get your extra skills? And it could be that you go and take voluntary roles, or even sometimes paid non-executive roles, to go and enhance your skills. And whilst you're waiting, and whilst you're still having a good time at your place of work. And I think this is really, it's really not apparent before you get there how much there is to be gained by working in these voluntary roles. So, having said all of that, then you kind of go, well, why would I be interested in the BCS? Why would that be any different for me? And the answer is, well, within the BCS, we've got a strategy, and our strategy is we're going to do membership, we're going to try and inspire people, we're going to try and progress them, and we're going to try and influence things overall, because we've got a Royal Charter, and the Royal Charter is about making sure that everybody gets education around tech. Now, when you think about education around tech, that's kind of broader than just, I'm going to teach this kid to do tech, or I'm going to teach this person to do tech. It's all of the, I know you all do tech, but how can you prove it to me? So there's qualifications in there. And then there's all the stuff about, well, how do we tell the government that they need to increase the curriculum or change the curriculum or think about new things coming into a world where education matters? Or how do we tell the government about the digital divide, about the fact that some people can't afford broadband and some people don't have access to more than a smartphone to do their homework on? So how can they progress in terms of education into IT in its broadest sense if they can't access it? So we need to be able to influence as well as everything else. So there's some dead fundamental stuff that the BCS can do, like it can do progression for you. So it can do training and qualifications and certs, and it can give you a chance at volunteering in the local group maybe, and setting up an event. And it can give you these opportunities to network. And then it can do things like, well, you know, there's a tool on there and it can let you look at your career, and you can go and kind of map out how your career works on your BCS membership, and you can go and create a personal development plan, and then you can go and align yourself to Sophia Plus, and you can say, oh well, I've got these skills and I've got them at level 6 and 7, and hurrah for me, and I've got the qualification. So you could do all of that with the BCS, but there is just a little bit more. So I'm just going to tick through these. So there is things like getting chartered status, so becoming a chartered IT professional. So this is your stamp to say, actually, this person does tech to a set of standards, is trustworthy, has signed a code of conduct, is somebody that I would want to employ because they have chartered status. So you might choose to go and fill in the application forms, find yourself a supporter, and you might choose to be assessed to be chartered. And that would be letters after the name, CITP. And so that's a proof that you are who you say you are. Now, if you think about how that aligns back to why the BCS exists, to kind of make sure everybody has got the skills and education for tech, then this is a proof that the person who works for you has got the skills and the education to do that thing for you. So when you stick that on your CV, then you're saying, look at me, I've done it. I am the thing. But there's more, and this is where I really want to get to. So all of my working for women in tech, all of that kind of culminates in standing as president tonight, but actually taking this bigger role. So if you think about membership, inspiration, progression, and influence, the things that we keep doing, we break them down inside the BCS to be in the institute, the bit that looks after the membership, education and public benefit, the bit that looks after things that we'd really call education. So, you know, doing stuff with kids or doing stuff in colleges. And then learning and development. And I'll split these two apart for you. So, the membership. We look after some 70,000 individual members. Individual members, 70,000 people members. But then we've got organizational members. So, for example, a company would become a member of the BCS and its people by drop down become part of the 70,000 over here. So we've got a whole stack of those organisations to service. And the servicing of those organisations is around how confident are you that your people have the skills to do the tech that you're doing. So, you know, you walk into whoever, British Airways, and you go, are your technical team competent enough? Are you confident that your technical team is competent enough? Are you confident that your technical team are getting the opportunities to grow, managing their careers, and we can kind of do part of that with them? And then we've got 120 different specialist groups and branches. So here we sit, but we could equally be sitting in Sri Lanka. And it could be BCS Women, and it could be the ISSG looking after security. So it depends on your specialism. But each of those 120 groups and branches has a committee, and those committees are feeders for the top governance bodies of the organisation. And this is where you gain those extra skills. This is the inspiration side of it. So this is linked to the education and public good part. And they care about computing in schools. They're doing things like barefoot computing at schools. They offer, do you know, this is an old one. I took those out yesterday. And they offer things like CAS. So CAS is the Computing in Schools group who teach teachers how to teach tech. So it all flows from what, you know, from that initial charter of we care about making sure everybody understands. And then we've worked on the NCCE to ensure that computing education gets rolled out properly across the country. So it's really part of a kind of fundamental part of our mission. And then here you go, this is learning and development. Now, this is a separate part of the BCS. So learning and development is a company in its own right, and it funds what we do. So, for example, if we want to do something for the public good in this side, then we will need funds to do that. And consequently, we can use the funding that's coming in from the products that we sell within learning and development to fund public good, because we're a charity. We don't exist as a kind of money earning organisation in its own right. Our whole aim is behind the charter and as a charity to ensure that technology is understood by everybody. And so within learning and development, we've got 31 apprenticeship qualifications that we look after, a whole set of educational qualifications. We do technical skills consulting, publishing, and a whole set of professional certifications. So if you've got the business analysis certification, if you've got testing, then it's come probably through the BCS, and this is the kind of qualification. We've got one that's relatively new for architects. So prove to me that you're the best architect that I could find. Well, I've got a certificate from the BCS that says I am. And we kind of know the business because we're tech. So Prof Certs is part of that. And there are our apprenticeships, and that's kind of ever growing really. As tech grows, then the apprenticeships grow, and we need to be on this. But we do a million other things as well. So we do respond to government requests for information. We do write papers. We wrote a paper a few weeks ago about AI. We do this all the time because we need to have that influence to let people know what's coming down the line, let them know what we know. And then we look after the Sophia framework, Sophia Plus framework. And we challenge people who join us to sign a code of conduct. And that code of conduct is about tech ethics. And there couldn't be anything more important in today's world than tech ethics, I think. As AI kind of takes off and we're not really sure where this problem child is going, the ethics of the computing in professionals who are working on it is absolutely crucial. So that tech ethics is key for us. And we do things like we're part of COP26 and, you know, we run this massive awards ceremony. Well, we've got two kind of groups of awards, but we run the Tech Industry Awards. Anyone been to that? Big bun fest, round about the beginning of December or the end of November. And huge number of awards, 30 awards. It goes on all night. Big glitterati affair. But this is us recognizing skill in technology. So we are much broader than that. So how does this come back to you and your careers and gaining those extra skills? So you remember these pillars. Well, we have to make those work. And so on the boards at the top level, we have to make all of this work for the kind of, for upholding our charter. And so we've got an influence board, and the influence board stands alone, and it's full of people who have got big social networks, or they're ex-BBC presenters, or they're a bunch of people who know how to influence external to BCS. So if you're really good at that, then that would be your kind of desire, wouldn't it? I can really do this influence stuff. I know how to work social media. I know how to get the best out of this. And I also know that tech ethics is important. Or I also know a stack about cloud or AWS or whatever it is, you know. And I know that those two things together, my ability to do social media and my technical skill, would fit really well on a board like this. So this is a group of 15, 17 individuals who will direct how we influence out there in the marketplace. So starting from, I've worked on a branch, or I've worked in BCS Women on the committee, or I've worked in the ISSG because I'm a security person, to I can go influence the country about security, about cyber, about staying safe, about online harms. That's really powerful. And then you kind of think about this and you go, oh, well, I couldn't just run it with the influence board and 17 individuals who are going to be volunteering for me. So I have to have a bunch of staff. So yeah, sure, we've got a bunch of staff in the middle looking after the institute and the educational and public benefit bit and the learning and development bit. And then we've got a whole other series of boards that look after it all. So I thought I'd just run through those. So trustee board. So the trustees are the people who sign their lives away and say, I understand what this is all about and I commit to looking after it and making it good for everybody who uses it. And so on trustee board, there are 15, 16 people who agree that they understand how important that role is and they will go and do it. And you probably get to trustee board because you worked on this mass of other boards. So this is the Academy of Computing. This has a whole string of boards and committees working inside of it. So like the Women in Research group of, I don't know, last count, I thought it was 30, but I could be wrong. But the Women in Research group going, we're women, we're doing research in tech, we're a different voice. And they report into the Academy. So all these different boards reporting into the Academy, lots of opportunities there for you to go and drive your career to the next level. And this one is the community board. This is doing it a disservice. There must be 10, 15 other boards and committees sitting under community. Community looks after the membership. So there are groups in here who will be looking after the fellows, groups in here who will be looking after CITP and how that works. They are very, very busy, incredibly active. And so there's, I don't know, working for Alistair, the guy who runs this, there must be 70 opportunities. They don't come up every year, not all 70 come up every year, but there's generally a turnaround of these roles. So get yourself your foot in the door and kind of work in the branches or the specialist groups. And you could be here going, I have a view on how we, the BCS, should support our membership because I want to make it all right for society. Come and join the ethics board. And then the influence board is sitting there as well. L&D's got its own board. That's quite a discrete little unit, and they are looking at finance. They care about making money. So this is a properly driven, profit motive board, so that we've got enough in there to make sure that we can do all of our public good things. So that's what they do. And then there's council, about 40 or 50 people on council, and they are advisors to trustee board, and they can be advisors to any of this lot as well. And then there's a whole string of boards that you would always have in governance. You would always have this lot. You would always have a risk audit and finance committee. And if you kind of never done this work before, you wouldn't know about that, except that when you do know about it, you go, wow, I don't think I want to work on that. You know, I don't want to do risk reports and I don't want to worry about finances. However, Ben, the guy who runs this, I trust him implicitly to say, oh, we're a bit worried about this. Let's just keep our eye on it, because you want that, and every company wants that, but you kind of don't know that when you're not working at this level. So great to enhance your skills. And then we've got registration and standards committee. Paul, who runs this, Paul's amazing. He just kind of takes a subject and goes and rattles it to death. So he decided that we needed standards around data science and data management, and we needed a whole set of qualifications around that. That's way back. So he went and made a whole series of liaisons with all these different organizations who care about data, and they've come together and they've set up some standards and they're building the qualifications that go with that. So this is where your quals come from when you go and say, I am a registered data scientist. These people are doing that. And they're working on AI standards, and because they have to. So, you know, if you think about AI, it's a bit Wild West at the moment, and there's no qualifications really. People are out there doing training, but that's not the same as saying, I can do this thing and I can prove to you I can do it well. But this is what they're working on at the moment. He keeps saying, oh, it sounds like it's a really boring place to work, but everybody wants to work with him because it's really good. So this is our board, and so this is trustee board, and we've been working to try and bring some diversity in. So we think we're kind of getting there. What I'd like to see is some younger people in there. For me, it's quite old. And, you know, much as I don't like being old, I am. And so this is quite an old board, and I would like to see us have some younger faces in there, because if we're to be representative of the people who are using and working in tech, then we need to be a bit younger. And then this is council. This is the 40 people who are advising it. This is Sharon, who runs council, and then she gets 4 people who they nominate to come and sit on trustee board, so that they will have our ear. And so we kind of populated this whole set of all the boards and committees. And they're really good fun, and they're a laugh, and we chew over some difficult issues. But actually, they're all really, really committed to making the whole thing work. And then just to finalize this, you don't get to work with these guys. Well, you might. So this is Rashik, I'm CEO. based in Leeds. And then we've got a series of managers. So Holly looking after the members, and Lucy looking after learning and development, the profit earning arm, and Julia looking after that education and public benefit. So you might have seen her at the House of Lords. She was doing a House of Lords thing, and we kind of posted it up on LinkedIn. She was very impressive. She was very scared, but she did it. And Brand is under the management of Carl, and then Rob again in Yorkshire, looking after the finances, what have you. So these are the staff, the proper staff. And this is the kind of calendar that I'm working to. So this is not for all, but this is every month a series of meetings that when you get to kind of deputy or president level, you're expected to attend this whole lot. However, they're not all expected to attend all of these. And so it's all run terribly efficiently by a registrar for us. I don't really want to say a lot more, except that I will open for questions on women in tech, because I know that I haven't covered that, and there are a lot of women here, so you can just ask me anything. Oh, you can't, I'm late. Okay. Just to say, do consider volunteering. It's really important at all levels. It's really important that you get your voices heard out there when we're influencing. So a couple, can we do a couple? Well then, did you say there's pizza now? Yes. So I will stay until after pizza. So if you want to ask anything about women in tech and you want to ask it separately, and how do we get the network to do X, Y, and Z, then I'm here for that. And you can get a discount on the book as well.
Thank you so much, Gillian.
Oh.
Really.
You want that?
Really appreciate you doing that. Thank you. Right, everyone, so we'll have a quick break for 15 minutes. So is it 6:15? No, 10 past. Okay, we'll come back at 25 past. I'll come and round you up in a little while. People online, if you just want to come back at 25 past, that would be great. Thank you so much. Right, everyone. Hi. Hello. Hi, everyone at home. Just waiting for everyone to be quiet. Hi everyone, welcome back. Hope you had lots of pizza and drinks. Feeling a bit more refreshed. So we've got our final speaker of the evening, our lovely Luke, who's going to be talking about mobile app strategies. So I'll hand over to you. Thank you, Luke.
Julie, from here. If anyone at home can confirm that's working, that would be fantastic. Okay, great. Okay, let me move some of these things out of the way. Great, thank you. Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. That's not working. Should now. It's great to meet you all. My name's Luke Stringer. I work for And Digital. I'm a tech principal here at And Digital. My And title is Riff Collector. So if you work at And Digital, you get to choose a second job title to tell you a little bit about, tell people a little bit about yourself. So I play guitar. So my And title is Riff Collector. I've been building mobile apps since around about 2010, and I'm going to be talking about them tonight. So let's start where really the smartphone revolution began, and that was with the invention of the iPhone back in 2007. So when Steve Jobs stood on the stage in 2007 and showed the world this device, it looked like the future, and it did turn out to be the future. It combined a web browser, a communications device, and an iPod. People can remember iPods. This was incredibly revolutionary back then. Hot on the heels, Google released a mobile operating system, Android, which was based upon Linux. They weren't making hardware at the time, so they partnered with HTC to bring out the very first Android phone just the year afterwards. And really, since then, we've seen an absolute explosion of innovation and really life-changing things. We've all got smartphones in our pockets now. And just to put a little bit of context around what we're talking about tonight, it's a huge market. So in 2012, 225 million iPhones were sold. That's quite a lot of money. And 1 billion Android devices all around the world were sold in 2022. This is big business. So it's worth around 336 billion. That's a 14% growth year on year from 2021 to 2022. And on average, there's $318,000 spent per minute on the App Store. So it's a huge opportunity. For people using mobile applications, this is quite a scary statistic, actually. 1/3 of waking hours are spent looking at phones. That's perhaps a little bit too much. I'm not going to pass any judgment there. And 485,000 apps are downloaded per minute. And the reason for this is these apps are obviously really engaging, but people spend 7 times more of their time on apps than they do web browsers and web applications. And that's partly because of the things I'm going to be talking about this evening. But on average, they load 6 times faster than browsers. So you can get to the value much, much quicker. So I'm going to be talking about mobile app strategy. So that's just to set the scene. If you decide you want to produce a mobile application, there's a number of things that you need to think about. So we're going to look at what makes a really great mobile app. And the first thing to consider is that we don't just have an iPhone and an Android phone these days. It's a huge platform. In fact, there's multiple platforms that you could describe as a mobile platform. We've got phones, obviously, but there's lots of different sizes of iPhones these days. Wearables are a massive thing, so smartwatches, tablet devices for consuming media and creating media. So with things like styluses and the Apple Pencil. Over the last couple of years, the Android market in particular has really moved into lots of different form factors for mobile phones. So folding phones, where the screen itself folds, is absolutely a thing. And all of these devices really work in sync with each other, including Bluetooth devices, so earphones, maybe smart home accessories. There's far more to building a mobile application these days than just it working on one size of one phone. So really understanding the platforms and how they work. And on Monday, we got a brand new part of that platform as well. So unless you've been living under a rock, you will know that Apple have launched really a really exciting device, the Apple Vision Pro. So this is their virtual reality headset. It can do lots of things. I'm not going to cover it in any detail tonight because it's brand new. But to prove the point that the mobile platform is ever evolving, we now have another part of that you could be thinking about for your own mobile products. So let's have a look at some of the things that mobile apps can do that are specific to mobile applications. So the most obvious one is cameras. So everyone's got a camera on them at all times now, and it's not just for taking photographs. It could be for using things like augmented reality. So this is the IKEA app, for example, where you can visualize the furniture you would buy actually in your front room using augmented reality. Image capture, not just taking photographs of your friends and family, but for example, sending checks. So when I got a check the other day, I thought I'm gonna have to go to the post office. How am I gonna do that? Just take a picture of it in the app, and the bank then uploads it and it works. So another fantastic way there. And also with machine learning and artificial intelligence, object recognition through the camera is something that you can do now. In fact, something I only discovered a few months ago, in the latest version of iOS, if you take a photograph of a plant, it can do plant recognition in the iPhone app itself. I was very excited when I discovered that. All these little hidden things. So if you're going to build a mobile app, think about using a camera and think about using all the ways that you could build an app there. But because these things are on us all the time, you can think about adding to your application extra layers of security. So using the biometrics. So whether that be a fingerprint scanner or a face identification system. So with Touch ID and Face ID. Interestingly, on the Apple Vision Pro, they're actually using retina scanners now. So they'll be using that as a way of securely accessing the device. So if you've got a banking application or an application with some kind of secure data, you might want to think about securing it with biometrics. And of course, your device is location aware, so it can be aware of where you are, give you location-based results, whether it's a map or, for example, in this example, finding your device. Payments is another big thing. So with mobile devices now having near-field communication, you can use them for online payments. So using Apple or Google Pay, you can buy things through the web now rather than having to put your actual details in. Or you can use it as contactless payments. You can build those into your apps. So absolutely think about those. And like I said, smartwatches and fitness trackers are absolutely a thing that is now part of the mobile ecosystem. Android provide the Wear OS and Apple provide the Watch OS systems, so you can build fitness tracking apps, health apps for tracking your heart rate, all sorts of things there. So if you're going to build a mobile app, think about those. That's a really great opportunity. Push notifications, you've got your device on you at all times, so it's a really great way to give users real-time information about something that's happening. It might be a sports game or a news article, that kind of thing. Really think about how you can use that as part of your offering to customers to be able to tell them about information. And if you're building an application that does things with text, then really think about how you can use things like Google Assistant and Siri to be able to issue commands to your application using your voice. You can really take use of that. And similarly, speaking those commands back to the users as well is something that is capable now. I'll say Google Assistant is a lot better than Siri. So buyer beware there. So there's some of the mobile-specific capabilities that you might want to think about. However, there are other things as well, some non-functional considerations that you should think about if you're building an application. So accessibility is really important, and baked into all of these mobile platforms now are a number of features that help people with sight impairment, for example. So if you're building an application, consider how it would look for people who have dynamic text sizes, so making them bigger. You need an application that can handle that. Screen readers as well, so people who can't see their device, the device can now speak the user interface to them and tell them where they're pressing on different buttons. Really try and think about that, make your application accessible to everyone. And even people who have motor difficulties, you can enable different things within their application to help them with the actual physical interaction with the device. So it's really important to think about that. And finally, this might be, obvious to most of the people in the world, but I design applications thinking about it being consumed by people in my country who speak my language, but the market now is absolutely international. So think about how your application performs in different languages with different language directions, even down to sort of the idioms, the way that you describe things in that language. And then also it's taking a step back to cultural things. So units and measurement, not all countries use the same numerical system. Not all countries put their commas and full stops in the same places. Currency is different. Time and date is different. There's more than one calendar, for example. And you want to think about how your application can work for all of those different customers. So when you're thinking about a great mobile application, it's not just about getting it on a phone these days. It's about considering all of these things. And there's a lot more as well. And it would take me all night to go through them. But there are lots of things that you want to consider if you're going to build a great mobile application. But if you've decided that you want to build a mobile application and you want to make it great, the next obvious question is how are we going to do that? What's the best way to build it? And here, this isn't a simple answer either, but there's lots of different approaches. So I'm going to now give you a little bit of a summary of a number of ways that you can actually go about building a great mobile application. So principally, there are two different approaches that you can take as a software engineer to building a mobile application. The first one is what we call a native application. And these are using the tools and programming languages and technologies provided to us directly from Apple and from Google. So Apple's approach is to provide you with the Swift programming language and all of the tools there. And the Kotlin programming language is actually developed by a company called JetBrains, but Google have partnered with them, and that's their preferred programming language. And the tools that they give you are the ones that they want you to use. They're the ones that offer the best support. We're going to go into a bit of an analysis later on. However, what that means is you write your application once for each platform. And there are other options. You can use a cross-platform solution, for example, React Native or Flutter. And what you do here is you write it once, and then you're able to deploy it twice. So if anyone's familiar with Java, that's the whole model of the Java ecosystem. And we now have that for cross-platform. So React Native originally was developed by Facebook. They're now the Meta organization. And interestingly, Google have created Flutter. So they've also got Kotlin as their native platform and Flutter as their cross-platform solution. So digging into a bit more detail then, as I said, Swift and Kotlin are owned by Apple and Google. They've been around for, this is probably out of date now, they've been around since 2008 and 2007 respectively. Here, each platform uses native components and lays out the application to produce something that works specifically on iOS and specifically on Android. And then you upload them to the App Store and the Play Store, and users are able to get them. This is absolutely production ready. These are the things that the providers themselves say these are first-class components, and you should use them where possible. So they're absolutely production ready. But more recently, we've got some cross-platform tools, for example, React Native. Here, this is an open source framework now, but it's sponsored by Meta, formerly Facebook. The language here is JavaScript, but you can write TypeScript alongside it. around about 7 years old, so it's a slightly newer kid on the block. However, this is still production ready. There are many applications, some of which here are written in React Native. So the Instagram app, for example, and a number of applications that we worked on at And Digital that I'm going to be talking about later are also written in React Native. And then fast forwarding a little bit more, we have Flutter. And this is perhaps one of the newer things to come out from Google. This is a cross-platform solution, similar to React Native, where you write it once and you can ship on multiple platforms. Interestingly here, this isn't just for mobile platforms. You can also deploy these for web applications and desktop applications. This is really a one-stop shop for everything. This uses a programming language called Dart, which again is slightly newer. It's not as well adopted, but it's the language that Flutter have chosen here. And this is production ready. There are some applications that use this. So the SpaceX application, for example, the Google Ads app uses that, as well as Groupon. This is something that you can absolutely build applications with and deploy them and build a great mobile application. But with all those different options, you want to think about the best approach. So I want to take a little bit of time just to consider how these work under the hood. So in terms of building a mobile application, this is the general architecture that you would follow. So starting from the bottom up, we have the operating system, and this is the software hardware interface. So we have iOS for iPhones and iPads, we have Android for Android devices. The next layer up are the native frameworks that Google and Apple provide us. They're things that allow us to talk to Bluetooth, the location chips, motion, audio, data persistence, basically the entire feature set, you're able to tap into them. On top of that, we have a set of standardized components. So these are the buttons, the switches, the scroll views, everything you're used to using in an application, they provide you. And then on top of that, you build your custom applications. For a native application, you build them using Swift and Kotlin. Pretty straightforward. They're the tools that Apple want you to have. For React Native, you are writing a single application for it to work across both of those different architectures. So you have a single code base written in React Native. And what that is doing is it's using a JavaScript bridge, which allows the application, when it's being run on a device, to tap into the native UI components from Android or from iOS. So that's why it's called native. So I should also say it's based upon the React framework for web. So if you're a web developer, you might be familiar with React as a framework for building web applications. You can take exactly the same concepts and code and build a native application. This way, it taps down into the native components to actually build the user interface. And finally, to complete the picture, Flutter does something similar. You have a single application that can work on both platforms. But here, rather than using the native components, it actually draws them itself. So it draws the pixels on the screen based on its own components. So a slightly different approach, but achieves very much the same thing. So the question now is how do they compare? So you've got these 3-4 different tools. Which one should you choose? Well, there's an awful lot of similarities between them, is the first thing to say here. Basically, once you produce an application and you need to give it to users, you're going to have exactly the same problems. And so you need to be able to distribute it. You need to think about subscriptions and in-app purchases. They're very much the same. However, there's an awful lot of differences, though. And this is really where a bit of technical analysis and perhaps some of the information I'm going to share with you now will help you decide what platform you should use to build your application. So let's do a good old RAG analysis. Which one's good, which one's excellent, and which one's potentially poor? So we think about something like UI fidelity. So how well can you build a really rich user interface? Well, the tools from Apple and Google are always going to be the best because they're the things that they give you. They can work the best. They're not abstracted away on a tool like React Native or Flutter. So excellent there. We're saying good for React Native because it's perfectly fine, but it's having to go through that JavaScript bridge. So it's perhaps not as good. You have to sort of think about it differently. Whereas with Flutter, though, because you're using their components, you really can design controls that are very specific, that have got specific animations, specific looks and feels. So that works really well. Localization, so being able to get your application working in different locales and different time zones. Again, native is always going to be better. React Native and Flutter are fine. You can do those things, but because it's abstracting across the two, it's a little bit more difficult. Accessibility is similar to UI fidelity because you can build the user interface with a really high level of fidelity. You can also get really nice fine-grained control of accessibility. So how big the text size is, for example. And then if you're looking to adopt new features that Apple and Google bring out, and you want to be the first to market, really native is the only way to get there, mainly because React Native and Flutter have to build support for them, and they're always catching up. So that's something to think about. Some other things. So if you're wanting to do Apple Pay and Google Pay, really the only way to do it is through the native components. it's not possible, or it's very difficult to do them in both React Native and Flutter. If you wanted to build a watch app in watchOS or Wear OS, again, you've got first-class support in native. As far as we know, it's not possible in React Native. There might be a way. The landscape is changing very rapidly, but as of this point, we don't know a way. And Flutter is a little bit more clunky, so I wouldn't recommend that. In order for your application to run on different devices, so phones and tablets, again, native is always going to be the best. But React Native and Flutter allow you to do that. They work similarly to a responsive layout on a web browser. So as you expand and contract the window, it uses a similar sort of way of building an application for different widths of devices. And then finally, old OS support. So if you're wanting to support many versions back of the operating system, native is great, as is Flutter, but React Native is a little bit more tricky to think about. So finally then, just to complete the picture, so if you're thinking about your technology approach, you also want to think about the skills of the people in your team. So how are you going to take a team of people who know one set of skills and give them the skills to build in a different technology? So if it's native, you might find that quite difficult. So we've labeled that as poor here. And that's mainly because those languages like Swift, they're either in your business because you've already got native apps, or they're probably not there. There are no real applications for Swift other than a native mobile build. Kotlin may be there because it's based on a Java language, but again, it seems unlikely. React perhaps is quite good actually, because you might have React web devs who can, without too much difficulty, reskill to become React Native developers. So that's quite a nice avenue. And Flutter, Dart as a language is pretty new. Its only real application is in Flutter. So you're probably not going to have those skills in your business. Whether you have those skills in your business or otherwise, you might think about recruiting for them. So again, you can recruit for all three of these. But at least what we're seeing in the West Yorkshire area, the ease of recruitment for native is harder. So there are less native developers. And from a market point of view, they can command more money. So that's perhaps a little bit harder to recruit them there. React Native, the market is really pretty good, at least compared to the other platforms here. There's a lot of JavaScript developers, a lot of TypeScript developers. And like I said, React as a web framework means it's quite a transferable skill over to React Native. Unfortunately, Flutter, there just aren't that many skills on the market for Dart because there isn't that much demand for Flutter at the minute. But then the real question, if you're a business person, is what is this going to cost, right? And this is, it just depends. It's very difficult. It depends on the application you're building. It depends on the market that you're operating in. However, as a slight rule of thumb, the native applications are probably going to cost you more because you're building them twice. There are massive exceptions to that. Again, it depends on what kind of application you're building. But if you're wanting to build an application that exists on more than one platform, then it's hard to argue that building it once and deploying it twice, either with React Native or Flutter, is going to be better in terms of your cost footprint. But it all depends on the situation. But in terms of the actual philosophies of these applications, build once, deploy twice, that is something you need to think about in terms of cost. So finally then, let's put some more specifics to this. So I'm going to give you a quick tour now of some of the mobile projects that we've worked on at And Digital, how we've tried to build really great applications based on everything I talked about at the start for our customers, using different frameworks and different technologies, and how we've succeeded, or hopefully succeeded in them. So first of all, there are principally three kinds of projects that we often engage in our customers with. The first one is a new greenfield application. So that's when a customer wants to build an application from scratch. They come to us and say, help us build it. The second one is an application that has already been developed, and it's a brownfield update and improve. So there might be new features that they want to add, or they know that the application is perhaps not stable, or they want to add some more features that they just don't have the skills in-house to do. That's the second kind of project. And then the third kind of project is the replatform. And that's where you go from one of those technology stacks to a different one, maybe to reduce costs, maybe to enable to go to your customers quicker, make it to market faster, for example. And we've got experience with pretty much all of these in the different technology platforms. So hopefully you'll recognize some brands here. We've got BA Systems there as a new greenfield native application. Applications that we've worked on that we've updated, Subway, Yorkshire Bank, Funky Pigeon as well. In terms of React Native, we built the As a Rewards application. That was a brand new application. Over in the Flutter column, we've worked on a number of internal projects to explore the technology and really see how whether or not that is 100% production ready, whether or not there's going to be any demand for our customers from it. But I'm going to focus now on this little section here, so the replatforming. And we've done a number of these projects. Personally, I've been working with Sky and the My Sky app for the last 18 months, replatforming from native to React Native. And there's a bunch of learnings that we've taken from that I want to share with you now. So when I re-platform from native to React Native, the principal job here is to go from 2 code bases, one of them written in Swift and one of them written in Kotlin, to a single React Native code base that can work on both of them. It sounds relatively simple. There are 2 aims. The first one is to simply rewrite all of the features in React Native, so aim for feature parity. So users really should be able to use the exact same features as they were before. And in that same vein, they shouldn't know anything that's happened. It should be a seamless upgrade. They shouldn't know that you've done any technical work whatsoever. They're only interested in using the product, not how it's built. So with those 2 aims in mind, if you're going to approach a project like this in future, there's a number of things that are worth considering. So when you're rewriting all of the features in React Native, you want to have a really keen understanding of what those features are. And we follow the Scrum process with Sky, and this has worked fantastically well to be able to understand the value in the product, working with the product backlog, giving that work out to various different Scrum teams who are working on value streams so that we can continue to deliver features into the product. And the rewrite started absolutely from scratch. So we spent the best part of a year rewriting all of these features to a point where we say the product is now back where it was and we can now release it to the customer. So you want to choose a delivery process that allows you to do that, and Scrum worked fantastic for us. If you're rewriting the features in a different language, you also want to consider how you're going to do that from a technical level. So how are your current developers going to learn new skills? And there's 2 pathways into being able to do this. The first one is native developers who are used to working with languages like Swift and Kotlin, which are object-oriented and strongly typed, which means they are compiled. They're used to using applications like Xcode and Android Studio. They're also really immersed in building mobile applications, so they'll know what a good mobile user interface is. They'll know how emulators and simulators work, and they'll understand the murky business of app signing, so to be able to create an application that can install it on devices. However, the other path might be web developers who've worked with the React tool on web, and there they're used to a very different tool set. So they're used to working with functional programming languages like JavaScript. And unless they're using TypeScript, JavaScript is a weakly typed language, so it's very different in terms of its philosophy. That allows applications to load on the fly. There's no compilation. They're used to tools like Visual Studio Code and NPM and all of the web tools there. And they're used to building web applications. So if you're wanting to rewrite into React Native and you have these 2 cohorts of engineers, you want to, at the end of it, come out with a bunch of really confident React Native developers. And the way to do that is to think this is actually a complement of the 2 skill sets. So if you're coming from native, you're looking to pick up a number of the React web developer skills. So being familiar with functional programming and weak typing rather than object-oriented programming and strong types. Similarly, if you're coming from web, you'll have a lot of the technical skills, but you may not have really Hello again. Can everybody hear me? Tom raised a hand. Tosin raised a hand. Hello, hello. It's gone green, so I'm going to assume it's working. Apologies, people at home. So a seamless upgrade, you want to use the same identifiers, so the application will install over the top, so you've got an upgrade, and that will allow you to do it on both iOS and Android, so that's good. But also in terms of the user experience, you want to keep their session the same as it was before, so they want to remain logged in. If they've got items in their basket, for example, they want to be there. They shouldn't know anything's happened under the hood. So in order to do that, you need to consider these things. So I'm going to close there. That's a bit of a tour of what you can do in terms of designing a mobile strategy. In summary, though, make sure to choose the right platforms. There are a lot of them now. And once you've chosen those platforms, really make use of them. Don't just build a web application. Think of how you can build a really great mobile application. And that should be great for everyone. So it should be accessible for people with any kind of accessibility or mobility concerns. Again, for people who are in the international market as well, think about that. When it comes to the technical side of it, think about the best build approach based on all of those different things that we talked about. So features and cost and skills. Don't be afraid to reevaluate your build approach. We work with a number of customers who've decided to move to a different platform, and it's been an absolute success. Plan what skills you're going to need, but really keep the users in your mind's eye. Their experience absolutely has to come first. And whatever you decide, the experience needs to be top-notch for them. Hello? Okay. Sorry. Absolutely, yeah. That's a very good question, Tosin. So, yeah, absolutely. So the question from Tosin is around the release process. So if your application is built in a native language, is that going to be harder because of the App Store and the Play Store? The answer is that it won't be any harder. Once you've created your application, regardless of how you've got there, whether it be in a native language, a cross-platform language, or however, you've still got to upload it to one of those platforms. Now, maybe implicit in your question, Tosin, is around, are Apple going to be okay with you using one of these approaches, so React Native, because it's not the tool that they're promoting. There are thousands of applications that are built in languages that aren't directly from Apple and Google. It would be bonkers for them to close the doors, because that's a massive revenue stream for them to be able to create, to get a share of those different products. So they really won't, I can't see, be a reason why they will start rejecting applications that are not written in those native languages. But once you've created your application, you've got to distribute it through one of those mechanisms regardless. Am I still on here? I'm quite paranoid now about that. Okay. I hope that's answered your question. Thank you. Anyone from the room? Okay, lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luke. That was amazing. And thanks everyone for attending this event, either in person or online. It's been lovely meeting you all, and hope you have a safe journey back home and nice evening. Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.